to say that you throw absolutely everything out because a particular individual might represent certain things that don't sit right with us, or just generally aren't right, particularly when we look at it from an Islamic perspective. But what he has done is that he's brought a lot of interesting, with his rhetoric, he's brought something forward for us to ponder upon and for us to think about. Now, one thing that I do want to say about this, and we won't spend too much time on the Red Pill movement, on liberal feminism, which is the antithesis of the Red Pill movement. It's the opposite of this. Is that one thing that you do see within this type of, and I'll call it male chauvinism, is that one of the problems that we have here is that when we look at the Islamic paradigm of things, and we look at the perspective that we have from that, is that this movement is devoid of certain characteristics which are the cornerstone of Islamic masculinity or Islamic manhood. And one of them, or two of them, that really did resonate with me is that there's a great Imam of the Tabi'een whose name is Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, great Imam, and he said that a man will not hit the mark, nor will he attain manhood حتى تكون فيه خصلتان, until he what? He obtains two characteristics. العفو عن الناس والتجاوز عنهم. He says there's these two characteristics that he needs to obtain. One is what? Is forgiving people. And the other one is overlooking their faults. This movement, and generally speaking, people who have brought on this or have consumed this new type of alpha male understanding of what it means to be a man, right, is problematic because of this. If you are to forgive people, or if you are to overlook their faults, weaknesses will seep into you and you will become less of a man. This is part and parcel of that narrative. And so that's why we have to be a bit conscious of that. We have to be wary of it, of where we're taking our understanding from in that regard. And also there's something that something resonates with me, and I'm sure it will resonate with all of you as well, because I think this should be written in gold everywhere. And this is a saying that's attributed to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. He says, and it's mentioned in the Bible as well, he says, why do you remove the speck of dust in the eye of your brother when you have a plank lodged in your arm? Let that marinate. Deep it for a second. I love this saying. Yeah? Why are you preoccupied with moving the speck that's in the eye of your brother when man's got a plank lodged in his own? Like, he's got something that's blinding him, and yet he's out there and he's trying to, he's trying to tell other people, and he's looking at other people's misdemeanors and their sins and their transgressions, and he's not looking at his own wrongdoings. He's too busy, he's too preoccupied with others, and he's not looking at himself. And this is in line with what the Prophet Muhammad said as well. He said, should you become eager to look at other people's faults, record your own. Remember your own. Yeah, so bring that to the forefront of your mind. So that's something that I just wanted to mention right from the onset, that look, we have to look at masculinity, manhood, and every other contemporary issue from an Islamic lens first and foremost. That's got to be our ethos, because what you see with this is very dunyawi orientated. It's from a very dunyawi perspective, but we need to be theocentric. Everything has to be through the lens of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through God Almighty. That's where the lens has to be. And if we take that lens, then we'll be honored. As Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he said that before Islam we were disgraced. We were a disgraced people. And we were honored with Islam. And if we are to leave any aspects of Islam, then we will be disgraced once again. And so for us, we have to be people if you're a believer, and that you are committed to the path of Islam, then first and foremost, everything has to go back through that. That's not to say that we can't have other ideologies and other isms that are going to sort of augment or support our understandings of the world and give us some benefit in terms of our worldview. But the first and foremost, where we've got to start from, our building blocks have to be Islam. Yeah? And having said that now, we're going to actually go on to something from a different, slightly different philosophy. Who knows what this is? Anybody who knows what this is? Go on. Yin Yang. Good, mashallah. Exactly. It's like it's the Yin Yang. Yeah. This is so. We are actually borrowing something. I'm going to go back to Islam. I promise you. But we are going to go to. We're just going to borrow something from, from the Chinese, from Chinese philosophy. So the Yin Yang concept, right? This originated from Chinese philosophy, and it describes how opposing forces in the world are interconnected, yet independently have their role to play. And they are forces to be reckoned with, right? And I'll tell you why I brought this up, and why I want you to really understand this and grasp this. And it's not to say that there isn't this. We've got these ideas in Islam. We've got these understandings in Islam. The reason why I wanted to do this is because it's something that stays with the mind. The Yin Yang concept is simple, and also the symbol is very simple as well, and it's well known. It's seen. But what you have is this represents many different aspects of the human experience. But the one that I want to focus on specifically is that they say that the white represents the male, right? The white represents the male, and by extension, masculine energy, and the black represents the female and female energy. What do you notice about that? Yeah, that the white, the male, has got a black dot in it, which means that there is an aspect of feminine energy that permeates the male. And vice versa, you have the same thing when it comes to the female. The female has the exact same thing, that they will have aspects of their character, of their being, that will totally resonate with masculine energy, will totally be in line with masculine energies. Right? And this is what I want us to understand, that these are not, when we talk about masculine and feminine, they are not mutually exclusive to the male and the female. Right? That there is a connection there, a deep, profound connection, and we see this Islamically as well. We see this massively Islamically. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but you know the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the names of Allah azza wa jal, we have this idea of the Jamal and the Jalal, right? Where you have, the majestic attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the beautiful attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we bring them into our own lives, bearing in mind that we're very much, we're very limited in our being, and when we talk about the divine attributes and we bring them into the domain of the human being, that they are going to be limited in their nature straight off the bat. We should have a good understanding of that and know that. That obviously when we talk about individuals and human beings, and we talk about mercy, we talk about love, we talk about gentleness and subtleness, and even those sort of more heavier concepts like justice, right, and being just, that these are all going to be limited when we talk about it in the human framework thing. So I just wanted this concept to be there before we sort of get into other aspects. And something that's really important is, this concept of the Yin Yang concept and this ideology is very interesting insofar as that it really talks about opposites. And even with the Arabs, they have this. They say tu'raful ashya bidadiha, that opposites, things are known by their opposites. And in Arabic, there's an Arab saying as well, that things are known by their opposites. And so when we talk about men, that we have to have a good understanding of women. And it's the same thing with masculine characteristics, that typically associated with masculine characteristics. Same thing, we should have a good understanding, a well-rounded understanding of what feminine characteristics are. So when we talk about masculinity, it can never be devoid of femininity. They come hand in hand. If people want to start talking about masculinity in a vacuum, more than likely, I can't say for everybody, but more than likely, they're going to end up coming to some erroneous conclusions. Because there has to be an understanding of both. We have to take the yin and the yang. There's not just yin. It doesn't work like that. So this is just an idea that I wanted us to have, right? And for us to be able to sort of understand. Okay, so let's just go into some definitions now, inshallah. Yeah. So this is just very simple definitions that we get from, Cambridge dictionary, Oxford Dictionary. This isn't sort of going into any great detail. This is just so that we know we've got a frame of reference, right? And actually, what's good about this definition is that this is very much in line with the Islamic understanding as well. We're talking about characteristics again. We're talking about the substance of a person. So masculinity is defined as the characteristics that are traditionally thought to be typical or suitable for men. And these characteristics, there's many of them. And these are by no means, exhaustive. Like, there's so many characteristics that you could put into here. But these were just some that I thought were, very much, they're quite important and ones that we can have a deeper understanding of. So we have assertiveness, or being assertive, chivalrous, humble, courageous, measured, someone who's a leader, someone who's generous. And these are the sort of the typical traits that we would associate with masculinity or manhood, right? And again, this isn't restricted to being a man. Like, so for instance, when we're talking about courageous, right? Does anybody know the story of Sayyidina Hassan ibn Thabit? One of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, a fascinating companion. When one of the battles was taking place, Sayyidina Hassan, he was a poet, right? But he was a lover, not a fighter. Sayyidina Hassan didn't really believe in fighting, in terms of he never took up arms. And there were times when the battles were taking place, particularly they mentioned the one in Medina Sharif, when the Battle of Khandaq happened, and the Prophet ﷺ was commanded all the men to go out, all the companions to go out and to start fighting, and the call for jihad is real. And saying that Hassan, he's like, look, I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover, and his poetry, it's about that. So what happens? Where the women are taking shelter, lo and behold, who do you see? Saying that Hassan's there. He's there amongst the women. And one of the, I can't remember who there's one of the enemies gets in. I can't remember his name now, it escapes me. But one of the enemies gets into this room, and it's the aunt of the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidah Safiya, who ends up taking this man out. Shoot! Now look at that. Isn't it interesting? Look at that. Look at her masculine energy coming to the fore. She clobbers him over the head, takes him down, right? And then she does have a pop at Sayyidina Hassan as well. Apparently, according to the traditions, she says, look, there's women and children in this room, and you sit here and you get up. She sort of has a pop at him, but Sayyidina Hassan, he wasn't of that nature. That was not his disposition. But the Prophet ﷺ loved him. The Prophet ﷺ loved him. He would climb up on the minbar of the Prophet ﷺ, one that was designated for the poets, and he would praise the Prophet ﷺ there. And so we see that there is going to be a crossover. All the time there's going to be crossover. And there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. To the general, there's always going to be exceptions. But our basic understanding has to be predicated on norms, on what we typically see, what men demonstrate and what women demonstrate. Okay? Then we have the female. Okay, so femininity. This is like the fact or quality of having characteristics that are traditionally thought to be typical of or suitable for a woman. And so some of the character traits here that we have is like, nurturing, resilient, modest, confident, forbearing, empathetic, and supportive. And one that really speaks out here, and it's because it's almost become a taboo, not just with women, even with men, is to sort of demonstrate levels of modesty. To have a bit of humility and be modest is seen as something sometimes as like, the person's a bit too shy or a bit too timid, and he's not out there enough. I get that a lot. Especially not me as an individual, but like in the sense that the circles that I work around and the community that I'm involved in. Lots of times parents will come up to me and they're talking about their the young children or in their teenagers or even young adults, and they're like one particular guy comes in mind. He's about 24. He just graduated actually. He graduated, and they're still always talking about him not coming out of his shell and him not being able to, But I've been saying it to them for quite a bit. And this is from our teachers. This isn't from me, but from our teachers, that we have to be emotionally intelligent when it comes to people who might not necessarily be up to where you expect them to be. Just because their disposition is slightly different, that doesn't mean now you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you start having real big tantrums about the fact that you know, your child might be somewhat different, but what have you done to welcome that uniqueness within your child? Is there anything that you've done? Or is it a case that, you know, you've got 4 or 5 children and every single one of them, you've got the same method. You've got the exact same method. That's not going to work, not going to fly. There's got to be more. There's got to be more that you offer your children. Like if they are, you know, introverts, or they might not be coming out their shells. At the same time, I recognize that, you know, sometimes having too much of one characteristic can be damaging, you know, and it can be something that's going to be, you know, counterproductive to that individual's life experience and their journey. I get that, but as long as you're not snapping at them, and you're not you're not demeaning them. You know, it's important that we show that there's space and there's breadth within Islam. And the other one that's really actually it's the same one. Sorry, Afwan. Modesty. Yeah, we're talking about that modesty. Like when we talk about men, like the Prophet ﷺ was really modest. Prophet ﷺ was really modest. You know, when he went through, you know, when he came through into the conquest after Makkah was theirs, they said that the Prophet ﷺ head down, gaze down. To the extent that some of the reports talk about the Prophet ﷺ's forehead and imamah touching the neck of the camel that he was riding. He was touching it, and that was because of how humble he was. Right? And also Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. You know, Sayyidina Uthman was a man who was known for being modest, to the extent where even the angels were modest before him. Right? We have these reports talking about that. They were very modest, you know, and the Prophet ﷺ was modest before Sayyidina Uthman. You know, and it's interesting that is something that those traits that they had are now seen as something that are perhaps negative, or perhaps something that, you know, they're seen as like having too much of them can be a problem. But I feel like that, especially in our times now, that we need to sort of revive these traits. You know, these characteristics there needs to be a revival of them, and we need to understand them in a more broader way, in a deeper way. Okay, so those are the definitions done. Now, so this is the crux of really where it's at, because what I wanted to get onto was that there's a report that was done. There was a piece of research that was done by a lady called Dr. Zahra and one of the other professors, I think his name was Amjad Khan, and they looked at something very interesting. So they were looking at masculinity, and they were looking at manhood, and they wanted to see what it is that we find in the Quran from that. And so one of the things that I wanted to summarize was this. I wanted to look into this and look at the findings that they had and unpack that a little bit, right? So if we start with the first one, which is submissiveness. Right? So there's 5 salient features that they found, right, in the Quran around masculinity. Now these features, these salient features that they found in the Quran, they're not exhaustive, and also they're not encompassing. Yeah, there's so much more in the Quran and Kareem that we can find, you know, in relation to masculinity and manhood. But this is something that they found, like reoccurring themes that they found. They took a thematic approach, and this is one of the things that they found. Also, one of the other things that's very important for us to understand is that when we talk about masculinity, the prophetic mandate here, I really don't want to separate. I don't want to separate the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ, right? Because they are inextricably bound. Yeah, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or the Messenger of Allah salawatu rabbi wa salamun alayhi. There was a man who approached Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, and you know he asked Sayyidah Aisha, what's the Prophet ﷺ's character like? What's his character like? And Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha, she responded with a question. She said, Alastu taqra'u al-Quran? Do you not read the Quran? And he responded in an affirmative. And then she said, فَإِنَّ خُلُقَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان القرآن. That his characteristics were the Quran al-Kareem, right? The characteristics that you see, all of them that are pointed out, that all of them, they were part and parcel of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And so they are inextricably bound. When we try to separate the two, again, it results in understandings that are incomplete, they're deficient. We cannot go anywhere without the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And likewise, without the Prophet ﷺ, we won't be able to access the Quran al-Kareem in a way that is wholesome, in a way that is, complete. Right, okay, so submissiveness. We start with this. Submissiveness is the primary and most exalted trait of the believer, man or woman, and the prophets and messengers whose conduct and life stories are expected to guide ordinary believers are praised for their submission. Now, submission, one of the things that we find in Surah Al-Baqarah is this idea of sami'na wa ata'na. This idea of what? We hear and we obey. Taslim. That's where submission is. That we hear and we obey. So the message that's come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet salawatu rabbi wa salamun alayhi is that we are to understand that message and we are to hear it and we are to obey. And this was the command that was set out for all of the companions. All of the companions had this message. This was the central theme that they had, right? That we have to be people who hear and obey. It's interesting. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say sami'na wa ata'na? Why did He say hear and obey? Why not, see and obey? You can see the Prophet ﷺ performing miracles left, right, and center. Why was it not see and obey? Rather, why was it hear and obey? Yeah. And this requires, again, thought and a bit of reflection on why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would see that. But one thing for us, as you guys will be well aware, is that seeing is believing. You know, the way that they've coined that term, and that's a sort of like a maxim, particularly amongst certain circles, that seeing is believing, is not, it doesn't resonate with us. It's not something that we adhere to, right? It's something that we need something much deeper. And we've got examples, where in Surah Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِعَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. That look, that when that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set forth the seas together, right? That He set them together. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between them has placed a barrier. When we look at seawater and freshwater, you would have maybe seen this, right? That ostensibly it looks like that they can't cross. And this is what's referred to in the Quran Kareem. Yeah, they can't encroach one another. That's what we see ostensibly. There's research that's been done to show that the water can mix, the fresh water and salt water can mix. But the idea there is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that this is something that happens, right? They don't encroach, and visibly that's the case. The companions never saw this, and there's many other examples in the Quran al-Kareem that they never saw, that they wouldn't have ever seen. That it was literally a case of hearing it and obeying, right? Even to the extent of when we're talking about Masjid al-Aqsa. I talk about Masjid al-Aqsa, straight away you've got a visual representation of what it looks like. You've got, boom, straight, you know exactly what you're thinking about, probably the Golden Dome, I reckon, that's what I've got. Right, and then you've got Masjid Qibli that might come as an afterthought for those people who know what Masjid Qibli is or have been there, right? But the first thing is the Golden Dome, right? But the point there is that we've got so much visual representation happening, so much evidence to surround us, and that means that really our faith shouldn't be so turbulent. Our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our actions shouldn't be fluctuating so much. The companions who had access to it a lot less, they were people who were really they had a real grounding in their understanding of what it meant to be sami'na wa ata'na, to submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to submit to those understandings. Now, another concept that's very closely tied with submission is a concept is subservience. And submission is not an absolute positive quality in the worldly realm, however, as defiance is often required. Yeah, this is also important, right? That submission is not always a good trait. It's not always a good thing. Right? So there has to be balance. In the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, absolutely, it's positive and it's something that we have to engage in. But it's not the be-all and end-all when it comes to your engagements in this world. If someone's doing something wrong to you, someone's wronging you, you shouldn't lay down and take it, just like be a doormat and it's all right, walk all over me. There has to be resilience. There has to be some sort of, where you stand up for your own rights, or you stand up even for the rights of others. And we see that this is again something from the Prophet ﷺ that we get. And we'll look at this in the second bit now when we look at altruism. But the Prophet ﷺ was all about taking care of people who had their rights taken away from them. When people had their rights taken away from them, the Prophet ﷺ became angry. For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he became very angry. Right? And that was because of this idea that people were being wronged and that justice needed to be served. And so the Prophet ﷺ really kept this, he had this at his heart. And this is again something that we should really try to imbibe as men. Right? As men in this world, that we should try to look at when people are being wronged, are you there to sort of stand up for them? Are you there to be the voice when they might not necessarily have a voice? And there can be many contributing factors to that. There can be lots of factors that come into play there. And so like I'll give you an example. A personal sort of anecdote was that there was a family that I was honoured to be able to teach, like teaching some Quran and what have you. And this family, it was only after some time, that I got to know the family. First, it was the man of the house. He approached me and he was like, "Look, I want to get some teaching done for that household. Is it possible that we can do it? There's a few older kids that I've got who are going into adulthood. They need some, tuition and some youngsters as well." I had a bit of a big family, so I started teaching them. It was only maybe around, I'd say about two and a half months in, where we find out that it's a domestic violence situation in that house, like severe domestic violence, like where the man is being very oppressive to his wife and his children. First, it was just with the children, where I started noting things. One of them was that when the case where what would happen is that the car rocks up, the dad rocks up, they see the car coming, and I see them visibly shaking, visibly like, "Oh God, dad's here. Oh, okay, what's the situation of the house? Is it clean? Is it not? Shout out, Mom, this is what's happening. Dad's here. They're reciting Quran in the middle. I'm trying to tell them, look, you're in the middle of an ayah, yeah, brother. You need to make sure that you complete your ayah, otherwise it's disrespectful to the Quran. That's what I want to say. That's what I want to say to them. But the nature of the situation is that it's difficult to do that when that happens. That was one. And the second one was this image will stay with me forever. The younger girl now, she was at the time she was maybe 12 or 13, and again I remember that the dad rocks up to the house. He's not even coming yet. He's just parking up. These guys were they're like, hearing had become so optimized, like it was mad. But they hear the car, and she's reading the Quran, and she's weeping. She's just crying, like really, like lots of tears just falling down all over the Quran, and I'm like, what's happened? Like, I hadn't heard the car yet. I'm like, what's happened? Like, is this like something? I know this isn't a joke situation, but I'm thinking, wow, she's having opening, she's understanding the Quran, she's like, she's reaching levels, man, like, and this is part of my glory, I taught her, that's the type of thing that I was going down, right? But it was very quick that switch up, man. It got into a very serious situation thereafter because, it became uncontrollable. I asked her, what's up? And she was just like, Dad, and that was after a weekend where they got into fights, and so I say fights, they'd had abuse and what have you. And then later on I find out that, the woman, she's like had 18 years of this type of abuse, long term of just where she's been beaten, the kids, their whole life. And now, even when I see them now, they're young adults. They're working, they're young adults. You can see this, you can see it. You can see the traces within them that they're so sort of like, they've gone through some real they've gone through a difficult path, and you can see their lasting impact on them now. Now that was a situation that I was in, and I was able to, and it wasn't nothing of my own. To be honest, I would have probably just moved away from that situation. But after getting advice from teachers and scholars and it was a case of approaching the wife first, asking her, are you comfortable in taking this to the next level? Let's get some authorities involved, let's get some people from outside involved. Initially, no way, there was no way. We're talking a good sort of 2-3 years in the making. She wouldn't go to anybody. She was very much like, I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm not going to go towards anybody. I'm going to stay. I'm going to have to live with this because there's so many family repercussions that I have to deal with. The normal sort of stuff that you hear, right? And then, but then she built up the courage because it got too much where the kids were really sort of, receiving it on the receiving end of it. And so she eventually went to some authorities. She got more family involved, and things got better. things got slowly better. Like the guy started fixing up a bit. She left them for a little while, and And from what I understand is that the relations have improved. But like I said, the lasting effects on the kids that I was teaching, and even some of the older kids within that family, it was like, wow, man. Okay, so that was a big digression. I apologize. Okay. The point is, stand up for those people who are, downtrodden. Don't ever sort of, cower. Obviously be wise about it. It would have been unwise for me to go into there and, try to lay the guy out or do something that I shouldn't do, yeah? That wouldn't be right for me to do. But the point is, you need to be wise about it, yeah? You've got to do it with a good head on your shoulders, okay? All right, next one, altruism, is a term in reference to selflessness. An individual that possesses this quality has the ability to show primary concern for others. This is important. Right? This is the idea of ithar, yeah? where you have a preference for the other even more than yourself. You have a preference for the other even more than yourself. The Prophet ﷺ said in a tradition, أَحِبَّ لِلنَّاسِ مَا تُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِكَ. Love for people what you love for yourself. Yeah, love for people what you love for yourself. Guys, I'm telling you one thing, yeah? People are coming into Islam in their flocks. I'm telling you they're coming, man. Like, I haven't ever, this last week, 3 people converted. Like in my locality. And then there was another person who messaged me. I don't know my man from Adam. He's messaging me and he goes, look, I've heard that you work here and there. Like, I've got a guy who wants to convert. When can it happen? I was like, marhaba, more people on my hand. The more the better. But this isn't like an isolated situation for me. There's people who are converting all over the place, particularly in these lands. It's happening a lot. And so the point there is the reason why I mention that is that whatever work that you guys are doing now in your own field, and like trying to even engage with people who are non-Muslims and what have you, keep it going. It's working. Whatever you guys are doing, keep that magic sauce there and just keep on going. Because something is happening. Something that wasn't happening, we're talking about a month or 2 months ago. Gaza, Palestine definitely is playing a role in it as well, but individuals too, that you guys have a role to play in that. The fact that you're calling, the fact that you're showing good character, the fact that people are coming, it's a beautiful thing, and that's all part and parcel of having preference of others, trying to bring what you've got, أَحِبَّ لِلنَّاسِ مَا تُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِكَ. What you've got, that you are trying to bring that to other people. You love Islam, you love Allah, you love the Prophet ﷺ, are you taking it out to the people? Right? And if you are, in what capacity? And if you're not, why not? And again, going back to if you are, in what capacity, what can you do more? Yeah? How can you increase that? How can you increase that, yeah? And how can you raise the levels in that game? It's important for us to understand that. Now, the second bit here, the most frequent expression of altruism in the Quran, this idea of being selfless, yeah? This idea of trying to put yourself towards the back of the queue and thinking about those people who are at the front. Yeah? The most frequent expression of it in the Quran is the charitable act as a duty of a way of pleasing and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want you to think about charity here in a really broad sense. I want you to think about it in a broad sense. And also what I want you to think about is the verse of Qawwamuna. Yeah? This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-Rijalu Qawwamuna ala nisa. It's a famous verse of the Quran, one that people get a bit aggy about, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that men are what? The protectors of women. Yeah? Or the caretakers of women. بِمَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بَعْدَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْدٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made men the caretakers of women with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored with some of them over others. Yeah? So some of them have been preferred over others based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored them with. Right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, and from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them as provision, right? Now look, it's very basic, this understanding. Like, how has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored the man in relation to the woman when it comes to getting that bread, earning? How is the man been preferred in that way? There's many different ways, but we start off with something very, very basic. That if we look at just biologically, we look at the situation, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us, and we look at men as being the breadwinners, and we look at women as caregivers for this, in this example, that if women are to become, are the only ones who are able to carry a baby or become pregnant, right? And they're the only ones who are able to provide children for the man, then what that means is that we're looking at a situation where the man has to be someone who has the flexibility to be able to work. And what I mean by that is that in and of itself, that is an advantage that a man has over the woman. Does that make sense? Like that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preferred the man to be the breadwinner just on that basis alone. Yeah, on that basis alone. That's not to say that, again, we're not talking about, women being able to work and that whole thing. But what I am saying is that women are at a natural disadvantage to be the breadwinner. They're at a natural disadvantage to be the breadwinner. Particularly if the ethos is that I'm going to be someone who is going to have children, and I'm going to raise a family, and I'm going to do da-da-da-da. And you might have come across it in sociological terms, the triple shift, the burden on the woman. Because they've got that, there's that dream out there, there's a dream that's been put out there that women are able to do it all. That women are able to be full-time carers of children, nurturers of children, full-time workers, and full-time looking after the house, taking care of their husband, all of these things. Right? And so the point there is that you will find people, you will find women who will be able to achieve this. There will be. But it will be an exception, and it will be done at the expense of something else. Something has to suffer. What's going to suffer in that? That's what has to be thought about. Like, what is it that's going to take the hit? Is it going to be the kids who are going to take the hit? Is it going to be your marriage, your relationship with your husband? Is it going to be your work, that you're going to be coming to work and not being able to give you 100%? Someone's got to take the hit. And that, from that perspective, is a dream. The man, he doesn't have that. Like, typically, again, I'm generalizing here. The man typically doesn't have that. If his responsibility is to go and work, that's his main responsibility. Like, he won't have the same type of responsibility of looking after babies or children. He won't have that same responsibility. Or to look after the house, typically. They won't have that sort of responsibility. And so again, based on that, that's something that we look at, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given an advantage to men. Yeah, He's given a preference to men in that regard, from that perspective. And it shouldn't be seen as something that's like, okay, yeah, you know what, it seems a little bit unfair, but this is just the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained things to be. And this is that whole thing again coming back down to sami'na wa ata'na, that we hear and we obey, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message is such, and this is something that this is how we understand the message of the Quran. And then being altruistic goes beyond material care, as it also involves compassion and sacrifice. Sacrifice is at the crux of it. Sacrifice is at the crux of it. And also, just going back onto the charitable thing, where we just said, وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. Yeah, we said that part of that is to part of that is to spend out of the wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you on your family. Yeah, part of that altruism is to spend upon your family. And the idea there is that for men to do that, if we want to be people who are going to spend on our families, right, that is a part of being selfless. That's a part of being altruistic. And again, in a much broader sense, nobody wants to be a charity case. We're not saying that, like, yeah, you know what you think you're being charitable by spending on me, you're tight, it's not like that, yeah? But the point there is that it's a case of that when we look at it in a broader sense, a smile is charity, a kind word is charity, all of these aspects, the true meaning of altruism, that's what we want to get to. As men, that's what we want to reach. We want to get to that point, right? And we want to be people who are willing to sort of sacrifice, really sacrifice ourselves. And this is going to be closely related to the next point. What time am I on? Okay. We're okay. This is closely linked to righteousness, because righteousness is a broad concept that threads through all other desirable character traits. Right? The Quran mentions righteousness in a wider context that involves honesty, justice, and fairness. Righteousness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that what? You ain't ever going to reach righteousness. You won't reach birr. You won't reach righteousness until you spend from that which you love. So what would you love? And here it's more specific about money, wealth. But let's talk about your provisions from a broader perspective. What do you love? Like what's your pastime? What is it that you would spend most of your time on? Even to the extent, what's your vice? Is it gaming? Is it streaming online? What's the vice, man? Look, I know I've got my vices, so I'm not going to tell anybody to start listing their vices. But the point there is that we've all got vices and we've all got preoccupations. We want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You got to give something up. You got to give something up, and you've got to figure out what it is that I've got to give up. What do I love most? And if you're ready to give that thing up the most, you will see doors open. You'll see the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come its own way. 100%. Too many people have traversed that path. That's why it's called the well-trodden path. You know, it's a path that's been trodden by hundreds and thousands and millions of people to say that this is, we know that what the reward for sacrifice is. So we've got to think about that aspect of it. The other thing, and this is again going back to the center of it, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-birru husnul khuluq, that you know the idea of like righteousness is good character. But the Prophet ﷺ doesn't stop there. He gives us a blueprint. I love this hadith, man. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Wal ithmu ma haka fi sadrik." He says that sin is that which disturbs the heart. That puts a little thorn in the heart. Your heart is like you're perturbed. When you sin, like wrong action, something that you know is wrong. People can say it's halal, people can say, yeah, it's good, but you know deep down that this is just wrong. I feel wrong. That's your gut, that's your instinct, that's your heart telling you what's what. Sometimes we can get away with like sort of technicalities in this tradition, in this deen. That's not what this deen is about. Our aim is not to be half-baked Muslims, and it's not to get off on technicalities. We have to try and be able to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill our purpose in this world. Man or woman, that's something that we've got to try to do. But that definition is very interesting, that it's something that perturbs the heart. And the second one is even more interesting. وَكَرِحْتَ أَن يَتَّلِعَ عَلَيْهِ النَّاسِ, which is and sin is that which you don't want other people to see. It's a very good definition. If you're sinning and you know you're doing something wrong, you don't want other people to see it. You don't want other people to see that. So what will happen then is that you'll do it behind closed doors, or you'll do it in closed circles, or you'll do it where you know that people won't know you. You go out of town, just in case some uncle sees you. You'll do all types of things, to try to get away from sin, right? To try to get away from being. But the idea there is your moral compass has to be what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where it's predicated on. And as individuals, again, as people who want to try to imbibe these masculine attributes within you, righteousness only comes from when you spend from that which you love, and when you recognize that good character traits as a whole come through righteousness. They all come through this. Righteousness is something that we have to aim towards. And then the emphasis on righteousness as the fabric of cooperation extends into community and inter-community affairs too. What's this mean? This means that, look, if you've got some sort of problems with Chachi or Chacha or uncle or auntie or whoever, you've got problems, you've got issues with your first cousins, your second cousins, you've got issues or problems with, whether it's politics within the family or it's problems with some friends or whatever it is. Righteousness, being someone who's upright, being someone who's got good character traits, being someone who is selfless, it will rid you of all of those issues. It's going to rid you. You won't be preoccupied with that. You're going to be the bigger person. You're going to be the bigger person, and being the bigger person, right? So again, this is something that can be seen as a negative. But unless the person's harassing you, and you need to retaliate in one way or another, or you need to respond in one way or another, being a bigger person is something that is easily accessible. It's something that we can do. And we've got to hone our skills of what we're about as individuals. What character traits do we have that sort of destabilize us, debilitate us, they put us on a disadvantage. Okay? So again, characteristics here with righteousness is this. The next one is another beautiful concept, is steadfastness. Again, this is mentioned in the Quran when we're talking about masculinity and we're talking about manhood. This is mentioned, and steadfastness, you know, is a very interesting concept. One of the reasons why is, and one of the things that's mentioned about this is that the scholars, they talk about miracles, right? You know, and they talk about saintly people being able to do miracles, perform miracles. There's an Arabic proverb, right, that says that al-istiqama fawqa karama. Yeah, that istiqama, like someone who is firm on the path of this deen, outweighs or is above any miracle. Yeah, so like where saintly people are able to perform miracles, and we know of examples that have come in the past, many a saintly man and saintly woman who have been able to perform miracles. They've performed miracles, right? But they say that something that outweighs that is istiqama. I met this uncle, right? And he was like, he's elderly now. I think he was probably into his 70s. Had a lot of light on his face, you know, the whole thing was a proper, you know, mashallah. And I spoke to him, and he was, I just wanted to find out, you know, his routine, because his routine up until then was like, you know, 70 years old and stuff, and he'd been practicing the deen a long time, he'd been an imam for a long time. And so I asked him, you know, so how long has it been since, you know, you came on the path? Like, as in, did you start from when you were like really young, like from childhood, or how was it? And he goes, yeah, you know, we were in a household where there was lots of Islam, and so pretty much most of my life I was with it. But there were times when there was a bit of fluctuation. And then I knew this man, that he was someone who performed tahajjud. Yeah? And you know, waking up in the middle of the night, for those of you who do it, mashallah, Allahumma barik, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, may we have a portion of that as well. But waking up in the middle of the night, especially last week when it was -6, is a challenge for anybody. It's tough. And especially, you know, when it's that sweet sleep. Like a sleep that you've never had before in your life. Like in the sense, look, I've got my alarm off for tahajjud, yeah? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I listened to a talk earlier, I'm feeling boosted, I've got to fix myself up. I want to do tahajjud, yeah? I've done it in Makkah bare times, I can do it, why can't I do it here? So I'm like, all right, I've got my alarm on, I'm ready. The time that I go to sleep is not ridiculous, so it's feasible for me to do this. Alarm on, yeah, man's ready, it's in action. I go to sleep, the alarm, it goes off, and I think I snooze all the way into nearly sunrise, bro. Man has to get up, run, do wudu and pray just to get the salah done. Honestly, I was thinking afterwards, I was like, yeah, Rob, why, man? Like, what is it? Is something I'm not doing, ya Rob? Like, you know, I know I've got work to do, but you know, you're hitting me where it hurts right now because I'm really trying, you know. So there's anxiety, and anyway, you know, this uncle I'm speaking to, and he's really casual about it, man, super casual. Like the way that he's speaking, I'm like, okay, so you know, the tahajjud, you've been doing it for quite a while now, you know, you're 70 plus. And he goes, yeah, so I started when I was 25. I started doing tahajjud when I was 25, and I haven't missed. Only recently I missed when my health went a bit down, yeah, but otherwise, like, it's just part and parcel of my routine. I wake up an hour and a half before Fajr, I do my things, I do my bits, and you know, this is the same uncle, yeah, who we were at Umrah with once, and he's proper like on the deen, like proper on it, yeah, like he's quite strict with the things that you have to follow. So we're at Umrah, we performed the tawaf, we've done the Umrah, completed it. Obviously everybody's getting their head shaved. This uncle, he's got long hair. He's got hair down to here, probably about down to here, to his shoulders, yeah? He's got long hair. Whenever he's gone on Umrah before, he's always cut his hair. He's always shaved it, yeah? And obviously all of the people around in the group, we've all shaved our head. So then what happens is that we get back to the hotel. He's performed his Umrah, we've performed his Umrah, yeah? And bless him, you know, he's quite a sweet, cheeky old man. So what he did was that he So his imamah, he wears an imamah, yeah? What he did is he opened it up. So the front bit, I hope I don't end up quitting something, yeah? The front bit is like it normally is, yeah? But what he's done is he's opened it up from the back so that it kind of covers his hair. So it's covering his hair. Yeah. Everybody clocks on straight away. Like, yo, uncle, what's up, man? What are you doing? Like, we can see that you've got strands of hair coming down, right? And he didn't say anything, and he was kind of, you know, like he just didn't say anything, and he kind of was a bit elusive about it. But I didn't let it go. Me and another guy, we grabbed him afterwards. Yeah, this was when he was like sort of by himself. And the good thing is you don't know that, uncle, so it's all good for me to share this story. So I asked him, I goes, uncle, look, every single time you come before, you've done, you know, you cut your head, you've done the hug, you cut your hair totally right down, and you've shaved your head off. What's happening? And he goes, you know what? Before I came to Umrah, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same guy who's been doing tahajjud for 45 years. Since he was 25. Because I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my dream, and it's the first time that I've seen him with his hair down to his shoulders. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not going to cut it now. You know, even if my family come to me with a blade, I'm not going to cut it. I'm going to keep it where it is. I'm just going to trim it down if I need to, yeah, for the Umrah, which is totally valid, totally fine. You're allowed to do that. There's no problem. You can do that. Yeah, you don't have to cut. You don't have to shave your hair all the way down to wherever it is. It's preferable. It's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but you're allowed to do less. But in any case, so he's kept his hair like that. Even recently, I saw him and he's got his hair down to his shoulders, but. The point there is that he's had some sort of openings, man, and he's put the work in there. And this goes to my other point, which is now talking about, you know, maintaining consistent devotional practice requires struggle and patient perseverance, and then disciplining the self, long term, of like constant discipline, yeah, it's considered to be a sign of uprightness, and it's something that will really give you your openings, right? So we've got to ask for openings. We've got to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us openings, that He makes it easy for us to connect with Him, inshallah ta'ala. And yeah, the one final thing that I want to say about steadfastness, there's another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us this is a very beautiful ayah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا أَحَدُ اللَّهَ إِلَيْهِ, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that from amongst the believers that are men. It doesn't say dhakar, because the word for a man is dhakar, yeah? But he doesn't say that. Yeah? He says rijal, which is typically used for, you know, it's typically used for lots of men, or more than like I'm getting stuck with words for some reason. Like it's the plural for men or for a man. But also the root letters of rijal, what they denote is someone who's standing on their 2 feet. So it's interesting, right? Because men, rijlain, yeah, on their 2 feet, that they stand on them. It's interesting because, you know, that concept very much permeates this society as well. You need to stand on your own 2 feet, son. What's wrong with you, son? You know, like there's that whole thing of, you know, you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, right? And so that concept really very much, it's within the Islamic tradition as well, standing on your own 2 feet. And that's why, even when we talk about rujula, yeah, this idea of manliness or masculinity, it's not necessarily just restricted to men, yeah, as a characteristic, because standing on your own 2 feet is also applicable to women. It's something that women need to also do. They need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. How am I doing for time, guys? 10 minutes. Wow, you're deep, man. We only started like. No, I'll get it done. Inshallah. Okay, all right. Combativeness. Okay, this is important, right? Because possessing the ability to fight, both verbally and physically, individually and institutionally, is deemed virtuous. Islam is not a tradition of pacifism. We don't have that in our tradition. You know, where you just take it laying down and take it and take it and take it. There are situations where they talk about, you know, where you have like tyrannical leaders who are in charge of the Muslim state, and you should obey the leader, and you should, you know, there are certain cases where that might happen, depending on if it's for the greater good, you know, and you had a split on this on recent issues that have happened in the Middle East as well, about what people are calling for. But the point there is that as a norm, the normative position is that we do not accept pacifism. You don't take lying down. If someone comes and does something to you, it's eye for an eye. Or, you know, if you're good, then you overlook it, and, you know, the first bit that I said about overlooking faults and, you know, forgiving people, that's important. But, like, if you do go eye for an eye, it shouldn't be like sort of vigilante. You can't just go rags and start becoming like sort of, you know, revenge is a dish best served cold, yeah? You can't go down that route, yeah? You gotta go a bit easy. And so it needs to be mediated. Especially because we haven't got any sort of like judicial system here, like, you know, like the Qadi or anything like that. But in any case, yeah, this is something that is virtuous, and this is where really the protectiveness comes into it as well, right? So the Quran allows retaliation in kind as a way of restoring justice. Desiring protection for oneself, family, friends, and loved ones is also seen as a form of defense. This is also a form of defense, that when you're looking to protect your family, yeah, particularly again for the man. And look, if someone tells me that it is not part of your innateness as a man to want to protect your mum, your wife, your daughters, the women of your household, tell me that that's not part and parcel of who you are. Like, you speak to any guy, unless there's something that's gone really wrong. Any guy that you speak to, they will have that protectiveness over the women folk of their family. Whether the women like it or not, or whether the women want it or not, I don't need your protection, you know, all of that type of thing, you know, that jazz, that's separate. That discussion is separate. The whole thing of independence is separate, yeah? But I'm telling you now, and ladies, this is for you, yeah? That know that if a man is trying to be protective over you, yeah, whoever it might be. Again, this could be, even if it's your father, yeah, and I'm telling my daughter this all the time. I remind her of this all the time, yeah, but if your father, your brother, your sister, sorry, not your sister, your husband, yeah, if they're trying to be protective over you, let them be. Yeah. In a way where it's not infringing on your rights, of course, and where it's not infringing on, where it's not ridiculous. Yeah, there are people who get a bit mad with it. I'm not saying that. Yeah, where you need to stand up and do what you need to do, of course. But what I'm saying is that the general position is that if someone is trying to be protective of you, lean into them and let them be protective of you. Where you know that it's not, you're not losing anything. Because I'm telling you this from experience of being married a long time, every battle cannot be won. Men, every battle cannot be won. Women, most battles can be won for you guys, yeah? Most battles, particularly in the household, yeah? But for men, we have to learn how to compromise. Yeah, and there's got to be some red lines, and I don't mean red lines. I'm not saying that this is, you know, you put those red lines out in front of the female, in front of your wife, and you do this and that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you yourself, within yourself, I've got red lines. Like I've got places where I know that I wouldn't ever see myself going, and I'll make sure that I wouldn't ever facilitate a way for my wife to go. There's got to be certain points that just can't be crossed, particularly in a relationship. And I know that this isn't, you know, relationship advice, but also just another thing that just came to mind is that don't count. Don't count. Like as in like, oh, I did this for you last week. Yeah, and I took you out here last week, and last month I bought this for you. Don't ever get into those arguments. Don't you ever be the one who starts those type of arguments, and don't you ever be the one who retaliates to those sorts of arguments. Because you know when you start counting, oh yeah, you know what, this is my right over you, and you aren't providing this, and that is not what love is predicated on. Love is not predicated on that. Know this. Love is not predicated on me reading out your rights, or you reading out your rights to me. That's not what love is predicated on. Love is predicated on something much, much higher. Something that we can't even speak about. Vast majority of us. Some of you might have clocked love, but love is like at the top of it. At the top of all of it. All of it. Going right to the top is love. And love is probably the hardest thing to comprehend in a deep way. In a deep way. Okay, so
So I just have a question. You know when you talk about compassion, right, and like romantic everyone and that, it's like in terms of like us as men wanting to protect other men, like in terms of like the brotherhood, or even like in terms of sisters, like for the other sisters, that's all right and well, right?
oh, absolutely, 100%, bro. Well, think about your ride or die guys, yeah? Think about people think about the guys that you probably be able to count them on your hands. Yeah? If you're lucky, because you guys are still young. I'd probably say that at your age, I don't know if I could count my ride or die by then. Possibly, maybe just. Yeah. But right now, I can say to you that I've got maybe 2 people who I'm pretty confident. I hope they take a bullet for me first. Maybe in the leg, maybe not to the heart, but they take a bullet for me. I feel like that they would. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to ask them, but I feel like that they would. But the point there is that is very important. Very important. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'minuna karajulun wahid," that the ummah is like one body. Yeah. In ishtaka aynuhu, ishtaka kulluh. If the eye hurts, the whole body hurts. And ishtaka ra'suhu, ishtaka kulluh. And if the head hurts, the whole body hurts. Point is that we're all connected. So certainly, men have to be sort of like protectors of other men. Brothers have to be protectors of other brothers. Women have to be protectors of other women. Sisters have to be protectors of other sisters. And we should always try to be bringing each other up. We're not in this hate amongst men, amongst women. It can always be this nasty little bit of hate. When you don't want to see another brother come up, you don't want to see another sister come up. We should be trying to help people come up in our communities. Even if it means that you put yourself down. This is part of selflessness and being altruistic. You put yourself down and you prefer the other person. You let the other person go up. Yeah? Okay, I'm conscious. I had a few other bits, but I'm conscious of time. Right? So, let me see if this thing does this. Yeah. You like that little effect, guys, yeah? Bro, you know what though? This presentation, all the fonts changed. Hannah, I'm going to speak to you about that. All the fonts changed. I had a really nice font and everything. Sephora will tell you I'm quite into my stuff. Anyway, alright, so look, stages of the soul. I just want to relate this very quickly to how parts of Islamic psychology come into play when we look at when we look at manhood, masculinity, so on and so forth. So look, the first stage is an-nafs al-ammara. Yeah, this is the evil inciting soul. This is like where you're just wanton, you're just gone. Yeah, you don't care about what the consequences are. You just want to, you're involved deep in sin. Your soul, you as an individual, your nafs, it goes left to right. It's influenced easy. Yeah, and it's like it says, according to a Quranic perspective, is one who has a propensity to indulge, like an inclination to indulge in self-gratifying desires with no sense of remorse and is devoid of moral discernment. Like there's no care, there's no concern about the sins that you're committing. I missed Fajr, I missed Dhuhr, I missed all of my prayers today. Okay, it is what it is. Or if there is like a bit of remorse, it's like something that's like it's an afterthought. It's not something that prompts any type of action. Yeah? And this is the animalistic state where one is in heedless pursuit of material gain and pleasures of a sensual nature. Yeah? Okay, so I've got a question for you guys. So, nafs al-ammara, who knows which chapter this is mentioned in? An-nafs al-ammara. Surah Yusuf. Good, mashallah. It's mentioned in Surah Yusuf. Shall I tell you what the fascinating thing about this thing is? When the nafs al-ammara is described, like a person who's like impulsive, doesn't really care about, not that they don't care, but considers anything to do with the deen as an afterthought, doesn't really consider it that much. And what's really fascinating about that is that this soul, this description of the soul in Surah Yusuf is talking about a woman, which is really interesting to me. Yeah? The reason why it's interesting to me, and look at what the woman is being accused of. Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam was known for his beauty, right? So after he serves his time in prison, he comes out, he does some dream interpreting, comes, and then the king wants to find out why he went to prison in the first place. So they summon the governor, and then the governor's wife is the one who fell for Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, whose name was Zuleika. And she's the one who's saying that, look, I gave into this type of appetite, yeah? I gave into it, and he is innocent. And then she goes on to say that I was effectively tricked by my own soul, by the evils of my own soul. I was incited towards evil, which is this nafs al-ammara, and only through and anybody who is on this path will lose their way, except those who turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's fascinating for me is that masculine energy, masculine tendencies, a lot of manhood can be found in nafs al-ammara. Selfishness, and this idea of wanting to do things based on your own desires, being egocentric. Everything is about me. I want to go do this, I want to go do that. You haven't got a real, the concept of God or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an afterthought, it doesn't come much. It's fascinating to me that in the Quran al-Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this definition in the context of a woman. Whereas the vast majority of research, right up until today, will suggest that men are the ones who are prone to and are given to that disposition of being lustful, fornicating, being involved in adultery, having multiple sexual partners. There's lots of this, like loads of research indicates this in comparison to the woman. And even historically, we know that in that time of the Prophet ﷺ, the women had no rights. Women had no rights, and men would have multiple wives, no problem. It wasn't seen as an issue whatsoever, right? The point there is, going back to that point, is that nafs al-amara is being used in the context of a woman. Why? And this is something that is very much down the alley of the man. Like the man is the guy men are the ones who are normally guilty of this, going after women, right? Typically speaking, and yet in such a way, like the way that Zuleika did, in the way that she did. It was very sort of like, it was in a very lustful way that Zuleika did that. The point there being is that why? Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using that as an example? Perhaps it's because it's to show that women also have this propensity. By no means to the same extent, never to the same extent, but they also have, there's always a chance that a woman may be able to slip in this regard. And that's why even in Surah Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, believing men, lower your gaze. Who else? Believing women, lower your gaze. The idea is there for us, like it's for everybody. But we know that the propensity or the inclination is for the man. It's just very interesting to me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this in this regard. And also what I want you guys to think about just for 1 second is that in this nafs al-amara, you will see lots of masculine tendencies. You'll see lots of masculine tendencies and characteristics really present in this nafs al-amara. And as we go up, so we're going to go up now, we're going to go to the next stage. This is the lowest stage, this is the base level. We're going to go to the next stage, and the next stage, and then there's one final one after that, and then we're finished, promise. The next stage is a nafs al-lawama. This is the reproachful soul. So this is the guy or the gal who's like sort of blaming themselves. They're blaming themselves. Like they're like, okay, I'm doing an act of worship, but I don't know if it's good enough. I'm trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but am I doing enough? Am I sincere in my actions? Am I doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or am I doing it because I'm showing off to next man? And the question goes on, the questions go on, So this individual recognizes this stage as an important stage of self-rectification. The transition from the evil inciting soul to the reproachful one archetypally exhibits traits of introspection, humility, and reservedness. The real essence of the reproachful soul, however, is one of discontentment. There is relentless inner dialogue and that permeates the individual, resulting in a mental state that is ever fluctuating. This is the example of a person who, and some of you might be there, some of you might not, who are constantly asking yourself, am I doing this for God? Am I not? Am I really at that point? Where am I in my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I making the right inroads? Am I doing what I need to do? Is my salah even accepted? All of these types of things, you're constantly blaming yourself. You're at that stage of constantly blaming yourself. Interestingly enough, the reproachful soul, and nafs al-lawama, we're going to go for 2 now. Which surah is that mentioned in? Yes, mashallah. Okay, Surah Qiyamah. Good, mashallah. Okay, nafs al-lawama is mentioned in Surah al-Qiyamah, the Day of Judgment. Why in the Surah of the Day of Judgment? Is it possibly because on the Day of Judgment, all of us, including the prophets and the messengers, the best of the best, will be in a state of blaming themselves? There will be this state of nafsi, that this is my fault, I'm not sure what my result is going to be today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be, he's going to be angrier than he's never been before. And so maybe I'm going to be to blame on this. Maybe there's going to be something that I'm going to be accountable for. Does that make sense? Yeah? So the reproachful soul is someone who is constantly blaming themselves. But right now, this whole thing of introspection, humility, reservedness, all of that screams out to me that this is now, there's a refinement going on of the masculine energy that that person has, but also now there's an adoption going on of the feminine traits. The traits that are typically exhibited within females. This is now at the second stage, the female traits are starting to come about, even in the man now. Even in the man that they're starting to come about. The idea of introspection, humility, modesty, humbling oneself, reservedness. This is all coming into, coming into play. And then the final one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us nafs al-mutma'inna. This is something that we ask for, we pray for. This is the serene soul. This is now where you're just not at qualms with anything, anyone, anybody. You're just at ease. You've got it. You've sussed it. Yeah, you've got the code. Yeah, you haven't got anything to worry about now. This is a level. This level is the point where there is alignment between the spiritual faculties, namely the soul, the spirit, and the heart. The serene soul is a state that is achieved by acknowledging one's perfection and impoverishment before God, whilst consistently endeavouring for self-refinement and spiritual growth. This now, guys, this is like the soul now where, for me, it's worth you guys looking into doing your own reading, looking at what some of the other scholars talk about and what have you. For me, this is like now where, a refinement of the masculine energy, of like the Jalali attributes meet and come into balance with feminine energy, feminine traits. Because now at this stage, this is now a stage where you have ultimate concern of another person. You want to nurture other people. You want to take people with you onto this journey when you're at this point, when your soul is serene. What you experience, you want other people to experience. You want to take people to the door of God. And you want to do it with love and compassion. The more you get to this point, the more you're like, you know what? I really do have that idea of ahibba lin-nasi ma tuhibbu li nafsik. Love for man, what you love for yourself. Love for human beings, what you love for yourself. That you want to take people on this journey as much as you can. And so the point here is for us really, is that for us to get to this point, we have to do what? We have to try to bridge our masculine and feminine energies. We have to bridge what? The attributes that we have, the quality traits that we have within us, that are Jamal and Jalal. That are beautiful in essence and that are majestic and powerful. We need to bridge them together. And then that's where harmony comes about. There's no longer a dichotomy of the inner and the outer then. There's no separation. Your inner is your outer, and your outer is your inner. In other words, there's no duplicity. And I'll finish on this point. What I mean by that is the way that you are with other people, that's exactly what you're like in your own room. If you're in a closed room, that's how you would be with other people. And that's one of the hardest things to do. Hardest things to do. Hardest thing to do, like where you're the same as you are with other people. And there's some people who have that, man. Some people they have that. They're rare and they're far and fair between, but you can find them. They exist even in today's world. You can find these scholars and teachers who have been able to refine themselves to that point. So we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He allows us to reach that level as well, and that this is a point where we get that harmony, and that ultimately it results in us, getting to Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la and being with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is, Insan al-Kamil. He's the one who's got Jalal and Jamal and Kamal. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has got that. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala sallam tasliman kathiran kathira. Okay, very quickly, any questions? Is it nearly 7 o'clock? No. I saw it upside down, so I thought 53. I was thinking, I only looked at it a little while. Okay. If there's any questions or if anybody wants to say anything, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you are free to go.
You mentioned that previous two different types stages on the soul from different surahs. Which surah is this one from?
This is from Surah Al-Fajr. Yeah, Surah Al-Fajr, yeah. And this is a very beautiful as well. It starts, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'inna, yeah? Exactly, yeah, and it's that sort of thing where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting the soul that's pleased and well pleased, right? And then look at just the way that it come into Jannah with ease, yeah, that's effectively the message of that. But yeah, this reaching this level is something that is generally speaking is a lifetime, worth of endeavoring and fighting for it. There's lots of people who they will try and struggle to reach this station, but it's not the easiest. There's lots of veils and lots of, you get into a lot of like tazkiyat and nafs, trying to purify your heart from maladies that you have. The maladies of the heart, like illnesses of the heart, are many, And just a point on that is that when we talk about the illnesses of the heart, diseases of the heart, one of our scholars he mentioned that we're very concerned about, if for example we were to get diagnosed with, something that's tumorous or a cancer, but we walk around with the diseases of our heart without even checking them. There's people who will be born and they will die with the disease of their heart, and it's never even been checked. It's never even been looked at. They've never even thought about pondering upon, okay, look, I've got a massive jealousy issue. I've got a huge jealousy issue, and I'm not addressing it whatsoever. I've got a huge love of this dunya issue. I can't imagine the idea of death. Can't imagine it. The only thing that I can imagine is living on this dunya, and I like it, and it's rosy and da 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 da. But these are all diseases of the heart. They all come in different forms, and we have to try to spend time ridding them. And that's also part and parcel of this whole journey of the soul. If you want to start ascending upon this, like masculine, feminine energy can help, but that's not where it's really at. The real hard work comes is where you start going hard on your own desires. You start curtailing those desires, and you launch an attack on them. Good? Okay. Alright, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you guys for coming, and inshallah, stay tuned for stuff at the Lantern Initiative. I work for the Lantern Initiative, Sephora works for the Lantern Initiative at the back, and we've got some good stuff going on. Please follow us on our Instagram page. We just recently hit 10,000. We want to get to 20,000 as soon as possible. So yeah, get sharing. Alright guys, thank you.